prodigy. Bodies making chemistry. Bodies on my family. Bodies in the way of me. Bodies in the cemetery. And that's the way it's gonna be.
I am by no means trying to claim my status as someone in authority to rabbit on about each and every game known to man and how great the graphics is or how well it handles. I will instead look at lesser known games and the stories that make up the backbone to them. Admittedly, I'm someone who couldn't get past the training level of Disney's Hercules on PlayStation. I refused to play Tomb Raider because I lacked the hand-eye coordination required to prevent Lara Croft from breaking her neck. I could, however, act as my brother's missing intelligence quota as he tried to work out all the ancient puzzles. To me, games can be 100 times better than movies and books at telling stories, and they should be. Had the Twilight series saga epic been a stealth game from the point of view of the vampires, I may have appreciated it a lot better as something other than kindling. I would have loved the chance to have been Edward, keeping his thirst bar high enough by tearing wild animals to shreds so he wouldn't spaz out in biology and cannibalize everyone, then running, jumping and climbing through trees, stalking evil critters and reading their thoughts. Let's face it, no one would want to play as Bella. Right now I'm going to stop my tangent and focus on one story character turned game, that of Sherlock Holmes. He quite probably has more computer games to his name than Mario, and the experience shows, although the pair have shared a game together. Now I'm one of the very few in this world that would buy a game simply because I recognise a protagonist as being a Victorian literature icon from the Great English Canon. Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper caught my eye for two reasons. One, it had a detective pulled straight from the 19th century before forensics solved crime in 30 minutes and made murder boring. And two, it has Jack the Ripper. Who wouldn't want to wander around Whitechapel with Jack the Ripper on the loose? It's like locking a Christian and a hungry lion in the same Colosseum and wondering what will happen next. The story goes that one morning over breakfast, Sherlock Holmes reads about a murder in Whitechapel. He brings his trusty sidekick Watson with him and the plot unfolds from there. It gives you a glimpse into 19th century London prostitution, lower class life and anti-Semitism. For those of you who like gore, there's certainly a lot of it implied. The dissection of a pig's head was a favourite moment somewhat spoiled by Holmes's matter-of-fact approach while Dr. Watson eventually goes away quietly to vomit. Despite the extensive mutilation of the Ripper's actual victims, the game tones it down to 1800s English censorship, so you investigate a chalk outline instead of the actual disemboweled corpse. The descriptions are still vivid, and basic knowledge of human anatomy is required for it to make sense. During the investigation, which spans a painstakingly long amount of game time in terms of months, we get to control not only Sherlock Holmes but also Dr. Watson. Speaking of earth-shattering unexpected twists, there aren't very many overall, so it pretty much reads like a normal Sherlock Holmes book. Except Watson makes himself more useful more than once, so I guess workplace relations have improved since 1904. There is no combat unless you count mentally challenging your brain in minigame puzzles comparable to the worst of Professor Layton in terms of obscure difficulty. It was particularly unfair at one point when I had to chronologically order 6 key battles fought during the American Civil War. Me being a first-generation Australian, I expected more British puzzles in a European-made Sherlock Holmes game set in 19th century Britain. I had to Google the Civil War and work out who was doing what and at what time. Frogwares, having mastered the old detective in 4 previous games, thought it would be more fun to turn Holmes into MacGyver when the need called for it. Sadly lacking the looks of the latter, Sherlock Holmes is required to gather up an odd assortment of items found around Whitechapel to do some pretty bizarre things, not the least of which is building a ladder to get into a house by repairing the wheel of a cart using a wooden spine board and wielding an axe. Perhaps the most childish hurdle to overcome is passing off catnip as a nice perfume and watching a legion of kittens mass upon an unpleasant lady of the night. Holmes is, and has been, an essentially selfish character, introverted to the nth degree. The character in the game is better than that of the books because instead of waiting for Watson to make a mistake and catch Holmes's ire, you control the pair so you're aware at all times of what each character knows. Holmes is confronted by women of the night throwing themselves at him and, like in the original books, he is not the least bit concerned or interested. Also in the books, the police are completely ineffectual despite being seen all over Whitechapel and only play a small part in collecting the necessary hearsay to bring down the killer. I worked out the murderer before I had every single fact and still had to connect the dots for 10 minutes at the end to trigger the final cutscene. Watching the Ripper go insane and reenact his crimes in mime on the floor of his living room sort of takes away the glory of unmasking him. With only hearsay and circumstantial evidence to confront him, one would expect the killer to slit Holmes's throat, run into the streets and hide in some other neighbourhood of London. All in all, the story makes for a good read. There are some atrocious attempts at Cockney accents which could be said about any movie attempting the same effect. And from start to finish, the feel is very authentic right down to the brothels and pet shops. It seems like a real Holmes story, and if you aren't sure what one is, I suggest you check them out, or at least try the other myriad of Sherlock Holmes games out there.